Are you unable to concentrate on the tasks at hand? Do you need help focusing more or leveling up your game? Here's a tip. Try Cognizin Citicoline, clinically studied to support mental energy, focus, memory, and attention. Cognizin supports brain health and supplies the brain with the energy it needs to stay sharp. Cognizin is a leading nootropic, featured in over 200 products. This podcast is powered by Cognizin. Visit cognizin.com to learn more and find a product to help you fuel your day.
Ready to achieve great heights? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to Power Your Performance, the podcast where we dive deep with leaders in the gaming world and beyond and learn the techniques they use to power their lives. I am your host, Gary Kleinman.
Borko Popic, welcome to Power Your Performance.
I'm doing well, Gary. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, I am so happy to have you here. Your title is you are the performance coach at Overactive Media.
That's correct.
Okay, so let's not talk about that. Let's go back to your basketball days. You've obviously care about sports and activity. Where did that start? When did it start? How did it start?
I played sports my entire life. My father was, big into soccer or football, if you want to call it, in Europe. I was born in Bosnia, spent some time in Serbia before coming to Canada. So, that aspect of, my life kind of carried over. My father was, he played some soccer, but he was, he's always been a fan of sports. So when we came to Canada, soccer wasn't as big as it was back home. So we kind of searched for, what made the most sense and just kind of fell into basketball.
How old were you when you migrated to Canada?
I was 9 years old.
So was sports one of the ways then that you integrated with friends in the community as your commonality?
No question. I mean, I can remember, the first weeks in the country with absolutely minimal language understanding, but just the playground at recess and, throwing a ball, kicking a ball, shooting it, was just a way to connect with people on a different level other than language, and, allowed me to kind of get comfortable and find my footing. And I think it set the stage for, my growth going forwards.
Yeah, I've always found it fascinating how things like sport can do that, right? That there's that universal language of game, and it allows you to integrate into a community that on its face and its surface may not have any basis for integration. Were you a gamer then in terms of video games at the same time, or was it more stick and ball?
I mean, it was definitely more ball, not a lot of stick. We played some ping pong and tennis, but
no hockey. Wait, you're in Canada. You're not playing hockey and strapping on skates. God, you can get deported back to where you came from if you don't skate.
I mean, a quick story. The first time I was on skates, we went to this used sporting goods store and bought these skates that didn't tie up properly. They weren't sharpened, and I stepped on the ice and the City Hall rink, and this guy came up to my parents and asked, is your son all right? Because he doesn't look good out there. Anyway, so that was my first experience with hockey. But yeah, I was, I played video games. My parents bought a Sega system back in the early 90s in Italy. And we were the first family to have this back home. And I remember playing, there was a soccer game. There was this adventure game as well. So, there was always a love for that. We played Tetris, these little handheld games. But I don't know if I consider myself a gamer per se, but, it was always kind of around in a way.
And then looking at your bio, then you got into basketball and coaching basketball. Was that the initial part of your trajectory?
Yeah, after I finished playing, there was a period where it was apparent that was the end of my playing days. There wasn't going to be much past that, but I wanted the game to continue to be part of my life. And I spent the early portion of that kind of transition time in scouting. So I had an opportunity to kind of travel the world and, look at up and coming talent for the NCAA, for the NBA, made some great connections, friendships at that time. And what I was missing in my life at that time was the connection you find when you're part of a team. And in the scouting world, you're very much on your own.
Right.
And you're meeting these people as you're on the road. But I didn't feel like I was making an impact, with a team on a level, where you connect with people that you can only kind of find that when you're part of this, collective group. So I started to kind of find ways to, get back into the game, like being on the court, being with a team. So I started helping out as an assistant coach, doing some skill development things. And then it just kind of grew from there. I coached at a private school, had the opportunity to start an elite program there at a private school. Then became an assistant coach at the university level, eventually the head coach. Then I had a chance to coach professionally as well. So it just kind of took steps from there and, kind of grew individually as I was able to have these experiences in my life.
Well, it's kind of interesting what you said, from being a scout, and being a scout is it's tremendously lonely, right? It's just you, and it's you and a notepad and a clipboard, and trying to find the diamond in the rough, so to speak, all over the place, and the need, or what you're saying that you were lacking, was the interaction with other people. And I think gaming at its core is about community more so than the game itself. And I think what you just articulated is probably the driving force for the growth of game or gaming, esports and otherwise, because of that need to connect with similar like-minded people in a community that share interest. But so you go from collegiate basketball and professional basketball. Where does the gaming come in? Or was it first performance and you applied it to gaming? Or were you looking at gaming and thought, well, how can I improve and help people perform better?
Yeah, I mean, well put together there, Gary. I think it's a mix of things. Again, I've been in basketball, but I was also a teacher. So I spent quite a bit of time, studying and researching and working with people and how they learn, how they grow, how they develop outside of just basketball, from an academic standpoint. But I've always been intrigued with, these, I would say, high performing pockets of the world. So I've, had an opportunity to study elite performers. So I've always been kind of captured by that. And then to, connect that with gaming, it was kind of just, honestly, it was a somewhat random opportunity that presented itself. And I had a chance to work with a team here that I'm now working for, the Toronto Ultra. Right. It's essentially on a basis of kind of doing a culture building activity to kick off their season last year. And then that turned into almost a consulting type of capacity. And then it turned into like a part-time opportunity. And then it became a full-time position that then works with both teams here in Toronto, which is the Toronto Ultra and the Toronto Defiant.
Right. And they're part of Overactive Media.
That's correct.
And for those people that are watching and listening, they may not know a lot about Overactive Media in gaming, in North America, who they are. The elevator description of Overactive Media, because it's not just a gaming organization, it's an entertainment organization producing content. So give me that little 10-floor overview, if you will, of Overactive Media, and then we'll really get into the performance issues, the health issues, the process and protocols to train, prepare for gaming. So
yeah, it's essentially like, if I would compare it to traditional sport, it's like a we have Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment here in Toronto. So under that umbrella, you have the Raptors, the Maple Leafs, the Toronto FC. So Overactive Media, under that umbrella, we have the Toronto Ultra, which is a Call of Duty team. We have the Toronto Defiant, which is in the Overwatch League. And then we have a couple teams in Europe that play under the Mad Lions franchise. So we have a League of Legends team, and now we have a League of Legends Academy team as well, and now a Valorant team. So it's a group of 5 teams that fall under this umbrella. And the other exciting thing is Overactive Media is developing this new entertainment venue. So it's not just for gaming; it's for performances here in Toronto, which is going to be a very special and unique place. So it's been tremendous growth, and in my time, it's just been over a year. It's the growth of Overactive has been tremendous.
Yeah, without a doubt. So with the time we have left, I really want to zero in on the performance aspect. And does performance, as you're preparing to work with individuals and the teams collectively, do you start with psychology or you start with physiology?
I think I personally start with getting to know the individual. And if you want to classify it as psychology, I think to me it's more about making that connection, as we talked about earlier. I stepped into this realm, and if I brought my perspectives and try to apply my vision of what a high performing environment looks like based on how I saw it and perceived it in traditional sport here, I think I'd be missing some nuance that's crucial. So I took time to get to know the individuals, to get to know the environment, how they function within it, to then be able to identify those gaps and growing points, and also to accelerate the successes. So again, I think what you're alluding to, I would say it's more of the psychology side, but there are a multitude of angles that we can approach this from.
So I was just thinking that with all the teams that you just, or the games that the different teams are playing under the same umbrella, is that within that you also have players from a wide variety of cultures, right? So you're not having all Canadians or all U.S. citizens. You got a fairly decent mix of backgrounds. How does that play into as you start creating kind of performance scenarios for the individuals, is to understand their culture, their history, where they came from?
That's, it's a terrific question, Gary. And I work specifically with the 2 teams here in Toronto. So our Ultra team, of the 5 players that are currently on our roster, and then the 2 coaches, we have 6 of those 7 are from the UK, and then 1 player is from Denmark. So they're all fluent in English, so it makes things a lot smoother that way. But for them, this is a new country, new culture. They're away from home, and these are young guys.
Right, and many times they're away from home for the first time.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And then you not only get their gaming performance and their psychology, but the alienation. I guess actually you're a pretty good person for that, because you can relate to being the new kid in a foreign environment without full language, and having to, sink or swim, as we say here. So that's kind of interesting to start with the culture and the diversity first and foremost, and then what's the next thing? I mean, how much of your performance is physical? Are they weight training? Are they dieting? Are they getting nutritional counseling? Are we staying away from Red Bulls? Give me some insight on what that looks like even before they actually start playing.
Yeah, again, there's, a room for growth is, in all areas. But if we try to, attack everything at once and try to turn it 100% around, then I think you lose the buy-in, you lose the connection. So we have to be very strategic in how we approach it, and we think about it in terms of marginal gains, 1% every day. That compound interest over time is where we're going to see those sustained long-term results. So yeah, incorporating
weight
physical
training
activity.
Yeah, are you weight training? Are they weight training?
I don't know if I would call it weight training. We have an area here in our facility that's dedicated to that, but they, our players have memberships to the gym that's nearby, and for some guys it looks like regular weight training. For other guys it looks like cardio. For others it's a mix of both. At the end of the day, we're not trying to make them Olympic athletes. We're trying to provide them with as much as it's physical, the mental space to be doing something else, to almost release them from the stress to allow for higher performance. So
no question. I mean, the company that I run, skins.gg, which is a health platform for gamers with a wide variety of products, we produced a 3-volume ebook about the top 25 injuries, how to prevent them, and how to treat them. And really what is probably the foundation, the backbone for the prevention is what you do beforehand, right? The stretching. Making sure that you are doing some weightlifting. I mean, certainly you don't want powerlifting. That's not going to work. And I don't think any of the gamers are dry scooping whey protein. The new way to take supplements if you're a powerlifter is to dry scoop, which I'll never quite understand because it cannot taste good. But from this protocol, how much of that is really teaching them stretching techniques and teaching them, strength, motions, and movements specific to their game, whether it's forearm strength and stretching and wrist flexibility, and how much of that is spent even before they start practicing?
A lot. And the piece that you alluded to is the teaching and education piece. Giving them these insights. And we have 2 games here in Toronto, and they're both different because one is Call of Duty's played with a controller, Overwatch's played with mouse and keyboard.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up because that also adds another dynamic to your performance coaching. It completely different skill set, completely different movements, and
absolutely.
And even the psychology of it, is different. So, is there a basic standard protocol that all the gamers in the organization follow in terms of, and not as a dogmatic mandate where you can't eat a donut kind of thing, but is there an overall process where you say, this is what you need to be doing, these are the carbs you should have, this is the starches, the kind of fluids, keep sugar out of it, maybe reduce caffeine, but if you want some stimulus, do a natural form caffeine. Is it that refined in terms of the performance?
The term protocol to me in this aspect is very rigid in a way. Mm-hmm. And we want to empower them. We want to educate them. We want to give them the information to make some of those decisions for themselves. So we have guys that, take caffeine before playing, before competition. Some guys don't. We have guys that will, meditate and do breathing exercises. For other guys, it doesn't work. So kind of a one size fits all approach is.
Oh yeah, no question.
I try to stay away from that. So I don't say we have protocol, but we have guidelines, and
okay.
we try to work with them because, again, the buy-in will be created if we come to these kind of ideas together. So we've had nutritionists come in and give us, how do we optimize our sugar or caffeine intake before performance? Because we found that if you're playing on a Sunday of a major in Call of Duty, there's a chance you're playing 3 matches in a row, back to back to back. And we did that last year when we won Major 2. The guys, I think they played like 7 hours almost in a row with, I would say, like 10, 15-minute breaks in between matches. So how do we optimize for those days? It's not every day in competition that it looks like that, but when we arrive at that, how are we properly, hydrated? How are we properly rested? How are they making sure that, their caffeine level hasn't peaked in the first 2 hours and they still have enough energy for the 4 or 5 hours that are to follow? So I would say it's more fluid, more holistic. I don't like to say this is what you have to do, because then the reality is they'll leave the facility and they're going to do what they want to do.
Well, that's true. You can't control it. I know Ahmad Green. I don't know if you know Ahmad, who's played for the Green Bay Packers, a Hall of Fame running back for the Packers, is also the esports coach for Lakeland University. And he used and uses a fair amount of his National Football League training protocols with his team, and that's X number of hours in the weight room. And granted, they're not bulking up, but there is that nutritional table, and there's a not a requirement, but a suggested number of hours to be sleeping. Right, pre-tournament, pre-practice, and certainly post. And I think he has found that it works. But to your point, they're all individuals, and they're all going to do what they're going to do, and they're all young, right? So, do you find that because the average age of these players is what, 20-ish?
Yeah, it's different for each game as well. I think our Call of Duty team, for us specifically, is a little bit older than our Overwatch team. But you're right. We have players from 18 to 23, 24.
And what I have found, being in the health and wellness side of gaming, is at that age, I mean, when you look at the average age of a gamer is 37, and it's split 50-50 male-female, esports obviously skews younger for all the reasons that it does. But what we have found is the younger that they are, the more invincible that they feel, so that if they're feeling pain or discomfort, okay, it's pain and discomfort. They're not going to necessarily treat it. If they're feeling a little bit sluggish, it's simple for them to go grab a Red Bull as opposed to something healthier, which is kind of interesting. Do you look at the wide array of supplements that are available and recommend them? I mean, what we have seen, and without getting into this too specifically, that we're releasing a new electrolyte product because there's not enough electrolytes that the athletes are replacing, especially in a 7-hour session. So are there electrolyte supports? Are there calcium support? Do you recommend those? Do they use them? Or are we not there yet?
Well, we're certainly there. And again, we had a great conversation with our nutritionist in regards to, supplements and vitamins specifically.
Okay.
And again, we don't make these things mandatory. It's about, this is what's available. This is the effectiveness, the uses, and it goes back to that awareness. And, you talked about sleeping and pain. And I think the more they can check in and reflect on, their mental and physical states, and building that understanding what the underlying factors are, not just the symptoms, I think it allows them to be able to be more proactive and then ask for help when it's needed. And I'll just jump to a point of, physiotherapy. A lot of our players haven't been exposed to that much before coming here. So it was a process of getting them comfortable with that, to be able to say, hey, I have pain here. I have, issues in this area. How do we treat it? And, we've been working with a great clinic nearby here, and they've been tremendous in individually building programs for our players, not just like this one size fits all approach. And they know that, again, our players are not, it's not like a basketball player. The injuries are different. The
There's no question. There's no question.
Usage is different. So trying to apply those methods is not going to be effective.
Yeah,
So,
I can personally attest to that because I have a trigger thumb that received an ejection several weeks ago, and in another 10 days I get another one. So yeah, it is it is interesting, and I'm glad to hear that the younger the athlete is being exposed to the fact that if they're hurting or they need something, that there is treatment, that it's not negative to say, hey, I'm hurting, right?
Exactly.
Take away that macho, which leads us to the last thing in the time that we have available is to talk about the psychology. How do you get your teams to say, because they're going to win and they're going to lose. Winning is easy, right? There's nothing to get used to in winning. There is something to get used to in losing. How do you leave it at the computer? How do you leave it at the controller and not take it with you and get it out of your head so it doesn't impact you during your next practice and your next game?
Yeah, it's, I'll compare it to traditional sport. The difference is you can leave the basketball court and you're not going home and playing more basketball. Whereas in gaming, they can play and win or lose, and then you end up going home and then you play more. And that community around you is kind of always there. The connection between the game and social media, it's prevalent. So the wins, I think, become, you're on a higher high because you get that immediate like adrenaline hit and response from your following and from the fans. But likewise, the downs of a loss can be maybe even deeper because the handshake in esports is the GG's tweet after a match.
That's
but
true.
As you do that, you're already seeing your timeline with responses of telling you how bad you are at the game. So the mix of that on top of
good point,
feeling like you've underperformed or the team hasn't executed the way they needed to adds a whole nother layer. And
yeah, I think it's interesting, and having spoken to many professional gamers and been to a wide array of different professional matches, what people don't realize that gamers are gamers, right? So even if they're performing in Overwatch as a team, when they're not practicing, they may be casually playing FIFA. They might be casually playing some other game to play, and it's just that joy, that innate joy of gaming, that's how they relax and wind down. So the last question I have for you, what is your recommendation as a performance coach at the highest level to casual gamers or competitive gamers that are not playing esports at that level, but frankly, they just want to kick their buddy's butt gaming? What's your recommendation for them to be in the best possible physical and or psychological place to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I work with, I would say that, the 1% of the 1%. But if I was talking to, the casual gamer, I think it's very easy to go down a rabbit hole where you find yourself playing 8 to 10 hours a day, and then that compounds over time. And I think it's balance. It's how do you, find avenues away from the computer, away from the system, to provide yourself with, the nutrition, the hydration, the physical activity, to clear your mind, to clear your body, to be able to perform. And again, that can be at a different level, whether it's a friendly match with your friends or at a collegiate level. Now I think it's clearing the space, a mental space that will provide you with an opportunity to just be at your best. And those things can come from finding other things that can occupy you. So whether it's playing traditional sport or spending time with friends outside of the game, so that when you can come, it's a clear mind and a focused mind to be able to perform. And I think if the more we do one thing over and over, then you kind of get caught up in this fog that's difficult to get out of. So,
well, yeah, you raised a great point, and it's a great lesson to leave on, and that is there is a mind-body connection. And gaming, for those casual and or competitive, forget the sports people, that mind-body connection is about balance in your entire life, so that when you do choose to take the time to game, you're doing it and coming in with some fair amount of balance. Borko,
absolutely.
I appreciate your time. Overactive is lucky to have you. Canada's lucky to have you as well. And if you ever come down to North America, I'll buy you lunch.
Absolutely, Gary. I'll hold you to it.
Please do. Borko, thank you for the time, and keep gaming and keep those kids healthy.
Thanks, Gary.
All right. Be well. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. This podcast is part of the MAP Esports Podcast Network and produced by Innovation Media Enterprises. Please be sure to leave us a review and follow us on your favorite podcast player.